Hey Hope, thanks so much for joining us again today. We're going to continue our study in 1 Thessalonians, and we're picking it up in verse 2. There we read, "We give thanks to God always for all of you, constantly mentioning you in our prayers, remembering before our God and Father your work of faith and labor of love and steadfastness of hope in our Lord Jesus Christ. For we know, brothers, loved by God, that He has chosen you." Now, as Paul opens and goes into this section of the letter, he's expressing an encouragement for the Thessalonians. He's telling them how thankful he is for them. And he does that by talking about how he constantly mentions you in our prayers. And that's kind of similar to what we might do if we were, say, talking with some other people and we wanted to encourage them to say, hey, you know what? We were talking about you the other day. You came up and we really appreciated this about you. And we were just saying how thankful we are that you're this way. And that's what Paul does here. He's saying he offers encouragement in the form of, you know, we think about you. And he says not just that we were thinking of you, but he says constantly mentioning you. So in the conversation that Paul's having, constantly mentioning. But the thing that's really cool about what Paul's doing here is his conversation is not simply with other people. His conversation is his prayers. It's his relationship with God. It's his conversation with God that he, along with the other people around him, are having. And in that conversation, the Thessalonians came up. And this is how he encourages them. He says, when I talk to God, I want to talk to him about you. I'm thankful and appreciative for you. But when we do that with friends, right? When we talk about other people and we share that encouragement, hey, I was thinking about you and talking about you. When we do that and we say things like thankful and appreciative, that's idiomatic expression. In general, what we're saying is we admire those people. We admire what's going on in their lives. What Paul's saying, though, I am thankful. Not just as a way of saying I admire these people, but I'm thankful to God as I talk to him for what he has done in your lives. I'm thankful to God for you, Thessalonians. And this is how Paul encourages them. This is how Paul opens his letter saying, you are loved by God, you are children of the Father, you are part of Jesus' kingdom, and I'm constantly remembering you as I talk to our God, as I talk to our King. So what is it that Paul is so worked up over here? What that he's so excited about that he offers them and reminds them and encourages them with? He says in verse 3, he remembers before our God and Father your work of faith, your labor of love, and your steadfastness of hope in our Lord Jesus Christ. So those three things there are linked to faith, hope, and love. And Paul lists those in other places as well. In 1 Corinthians 13, that's how he kind of wraps up that chapter. These are great Christian virtues. They're sort of like a summation of Christian virtue for the first century and for continuing today. And Paul's so ecstatic because he sees those virtues in the Thessalonians, right? That's what he's seeing in them. He's seeing that their actions have been changed by those virtues. And so he uses words like work of faith. Your faith is producing work, Thessalonians. And I'm so thrilled that that's true. He says, the labor of love. Your love is causing you to labor over others, causing you to labor over your worship of God, your expression of care and concern for other people. Your actions have been shifted by your love, and I'm thrilled and I'm thankful to God, Thessalonians, for that. And then he says, your steadfastness, which has been produced by your hope in our Lord Jesus Christ. These are all words of effort. Paul's saying that your virtue, the kingdom realities existing in your heart, are coming out and are being seen in step by step, day by day, in the grind, working, laboring, steadfastness, perseverance, endurance. It's in the daily grind of putting effort into living out these actions of virtue. It's not as though these things are some ethereal reality behind the scenes inside of your heart. No, these are things that have borne themselves out in real action, in deliberate action. An action that may not always feel natural, but it's an effort that you're putting in place because you believe and you're a part of the kingdom of Jesus. You're a part of the family of God. So Paul is thankful. He constantly mentions these things. He constantly brings them up as he's praying to the Father. But then he does one more thing, which I think is very interesting. In verse 4, he begins it with the word for. He says, "For we know, brothers, loved by God, that he has chosen you." And the connection of that thought to what Paul just said is, I'm so thankful. I bring this up whenever I'm talking to God. I talk about you, and I'm thankful for what God has done in your life, that you have these virtues of Christianity, that you're living those things out in behaviors where you've put effort and intentionality and deliberate decisions to act out the virtues of faith, hope, and love. I see that in you, and the reason that makes me thankful, the for underneath all of that, the reason that's good news for me, that's exciting to me, for we know, brothers loved by God, that he has chosen you. See, all of that other stuff, it wouldn't give Paul a reason to be super thrilled and thankful if he didn't know that the Thessalonians had been loved by God and chosen by God. But because he knows that God has loved them, and because he knows that God has chosen them, the reality of God's love producing virtue in them gives him so much reason to be thankful. The reality that God's choosing them and loving them is producing love in them, is producing faith in them, is producing hope in them, makes him thrilled and ecstatic. And he says, I want to encourage you, Thessalonians. I can see God at work in you. I know he has chosen you. I know that he loves you. And that's Paul's encouragement to the Thessalonians. Next week, we're going to pick it up, and we're going to explain and see how Paul could be so confident that God had chosen the Thessalonians. So we'll get to that next week. But what I want us to walk away with today is a reminder that when we are encouraging one another, like Paul is encouraging the Thessalonians, the most encouraging thing we can offer people is to point them back to how we see God at work in them. When we draw attention to what God is doing inside of them, it can encourage them to know that they are part of the culture of God, part of the people of God, part of the family of God. And so extend encouragement to each other that way. Take some time to ask yourself, how have I seen God working in the people around me? Where have I seen God changing and cultivating virtues of faith, hope, and love in the people around me? And then take the time to say thank you to God for that, and tell other people that you're thankful for the way God is working in their lives. And I want to ask us the question, for maybe some more introspection, or for a good way for us to think is, faith, hope, and love are a part of the lifestyle and the culture of Christianity, the culture of Jesus' kingdom. And so how are you doing in the faith department, in the hope department, and in the love department? Are faith, hope, and love cultivating and changing and transforming the way that you engage with the world around you? And if there's an area that could use some work, then open yourself up to God and ask him to help you grow in your faith, help you grow in your love, and help you grow in your hope. And realize that the growth in faith, love, and hope, or faith, hope, and love, is not going to be divorced or separated from your real behavior and your actual actions, the work and the labor and the endurance that you're putting in your day-to-day life. Those things are going to be connected to, and need to be connected to, the inner person's growth of faith, the inner person's growth in hope and in love. I want to encourage you to take this picture of kingdom culture that we get, this snapshot of the Thessalonians, and focus in on what is Jesus calling us to in terms of perseverance and steadfastness in hope and faith and love, and these different pieces, as we navigate the remainder of our time in this pandemic. And when we get to the other side of this, when we look back, what do we want to be able to be thankful for that God accomplished in our lives? What growth do we want to be thankful for that God worked on as we were in under stay-at-home orders, while we were sheltering in place, or while we were socially distancing ourselves? When we look back at it, how do we want to pray along with Paul and constantly mention in our prayers how thankful we are for the way that God worked? Well, I Hope that this was encouraging to you. I look forward to next week when we're going to continue moving forward through Paul's encouragement and his reasons why he knows that the Thessalonians are chosen. This weekend, I'm excited to worship together with you at church. It's going to be great to see your faces again. Go in peace.